Okay, so I think we're going to start now. I can facilitate if anyone else joins us a little bit later. But first of all, to say you're very welcome to the Scottish Artists Archive Network latest webinar with Emma Dove. I'm going to introduce Emma in a moment. But for those of you who have just maybe newly joined, just a wee bit of housekeeping, just to say if you could keep your audio on mute, that would be excellent. We are recording the session today. You can listen back to it as well. But there will be an opportunity at the end after Emma's shared her presentation for questions, and there's different ways in which you can choose to do that. You can either come off mute and ask a question, or you can put a question in the chat and I can pose it to Emma on your behalf too. That's up to you. But we're going to get started now, and I just really like to welcome, we're really delighted to welcome and to introduce Emma Dove, who is the Director and Custodian of the Katy Dove Archive, for a conversation that's going to explore the unique challenges and opportunities of caring for an artist's legacy across a remarkably diverse body of work. So Katy Dove was an artist. She was born in 1970. She died in 2015. She was a multidisciplinary artist whose practice encompassed animation, film, painting, drawing, printmaking, photography, sound and collaborative projects. Following her untimely death in the midst of an active career, there was little opportunity to establish a long-term framework for preserving and sharing her work. In 2019, Art 360 worked closely with the Katy Dove estate to develop the Artist's Archive and Legacy, and a key aspect of Emma's work has been creating new opportunities for audiences to encounter and engage with Katy's practice. Recent projects include an open studio event and a pop-up exhibition in 2023, and currently Emma has been working with Chorus on The Subtle Body, a two-person exhibition with Katy Dove and Ligea Clark, which is at Kinning Park Complex for Glasgow International 2026, and it's open right now and it's on until the 21st of June. And I'm sure Emma's going to be talking a little bit more about that exhibition and some of the events that they've planned as part of that. There's also a new case study that Emma has filled in about the Katy Dove Archive, which is on the SAN website too, which you can explore more about Emma's journey into developing Katy's archive. So I'm really delighted to hand over now to Emma. Before I do, can I just make sure that everyone has got their audio off? I can hear a little bit of reverberation somewhere. Okay, thank you very much. I'm handing over now to Emma. Welcome, Emma.
Thank you, Saoirse. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, can you see that okay?
Yep.
Hey, welcome. Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for joining. And thanks, Saoirse, for the intro and for inviting me to come and chat about my work with Katy's Archive. Just to say a little bit briefly before I begin about my own background. I myself am a filmmaker and I work in sort of documentary and artist film. And I also work part-time for Campbell Line, which is an arts organisation based in rural Dumfries and Galloway. And I became the custodian of Katy's archive, as Saoirse said, in 2015, following Katy's death. And so what I'd like to do is just talk about kind of my journey of coming to care for Katy's work. And although I do have an arts background myself, and in a way that kind of made me and because I also work freelance, I have a degree of flexibility in my kind of work that allowed me to take on caring for Katy's work and I guess had certain experience that was relevant to that as well. Um, but it's definitely been a real kind of journey for me, and I am, and kind of always was up until Katy's death. Um, my relationship with her was predominantly a sibling relationship, and we never worked together directly. And so I've learned a lot about her work. Although I sort of thought of her as a bit of a mentor figure. So I'm the youngest of five, and Katy was the second oldest. So, and Katy was very generous with her kind of time and sharing her her kind of cultural life with me when I was growing up, which was very kind of significant in terms of my journey in the arts. But in terms of coming to really understand Katie's work and Katie's archive, that's very much been a process that has kind of taken unfolded since Katie's death. And so, yeah, I'm going to just talk really about that journey, which has been kind of the past decade. So um, when Katie died, all of her work became the property of my mum, who is the executor of Katie's estate.
Right.
And when Katie died, we went through kind of various stages, processes um, of kind of archiving, of cataloging, and that was very much steered and um, supported through Katie's peers and Katie's friends. And that was a really significant kind of um, moment for us at the time. So, as Sorsha said, there had never really been a chance to look at archiving with Katie's work within her lifetime. And Katie was very much still a practicing artist before her illness and was kind of in the midst of various projects. And so we were really kind of starting from scratch in terms of thinking about her work as an archive and how to kind of how to organize that and how to catalog. And so initially we started with some amazing kind of spreadsheet work and guidelines and guidance through Katie's friends, in particular through Kirstine and Anna, who spent a good few days, I think, with Katie's work, kind of photographing and creating that initial catalogue, which felt kind of really significant. And it's been interesting to look back at that today when I've been pulling photos together for this presentation, to think about kind of where we were at that point and the journey that the archive has taken since then. And so this was kind of the catalogue at the time, photographs of all of the artworks in Katie's archive, which included sketches, paintings, photographic work, animations, a really significant digital archive. And I realize I've kind of launched into this without kind of saying much about what Katie did, but Katie had a kind of multidisciplinary practice. She Her process involved kind of free association, drawing and painting, and then creating animations by scanning work that she had done on paper or paintings and animating through kind of movement and repetition. Sound and rhythm was also a really kind of significant part of her work, and she often worked on the soundtracks to her animations herself or in collaboration with other artists and musicians. She was also a member of a couple of music groups, including the band Muscles of Joy. And yeah, so all of these things kind of made up her practice. So this is where we started. I wanted to include this picture of Anna, initially doing that archiving process. There was a story as to the outfit. I can't quite remember exactly what that was, but I've always enjoyed that this image was included within the initial archive. And then in 2016, we worked with DCA, Dundee Contemporary Arts, to um, work towards a memorial exhibition of Katie's work. And that was a conversation that had been kind of initiated at a very early stage with Katie, prior to her death. And so that was something that we picked up with Graham Domk, who was curator at DCA at the time. And actually, at that stage, all of Katie's archive, or most of that archive, actually travelled up to Dundee. And Graham was kind of the next step in this process um, of organising and caring for the physical archive. And so Graham went through a whole process himself of, um, again, kind of photographing works and arranging works into archival boxes for us, which are still kind of um, the technique that we're using within the archive um, for organizing those kind of all of those physical works on paper, sketches, paintings, of which there are over kind of, I think, 800 pieces of work on paper. And other things within the archive, this is a, an archive box which contains a folder of the original acetates for the first um, animation that Katy made when she was doing her degree show at Duncan of Jordanstone in Dundee. And so there's also a lot of sketchbook work, there's university project work in Katy's archive, and these are all things that it's been kind of important for us to take time to catalogue as well. So these are some of the images from the memorial exhibition at DCA. And this was, I think, a really significant step for us as Katy's family, um, and a significant exhibition, of her work, which included works, framed works, also kind of more process sketches within the vitrines. You can see one of the vitrines in the exhibition space there. And also included a whole room of projected animation within the larger gallery space at DCA. Which was just a like incredible space to show Katy's work, and felt really um, like a really fitting place to see those works projected really big in a dark space, really kind of as Katy intended them to be seen and experienced, and to see kind of several animations playing concurrently within that space as well. And I found this image today as well in my Instagram feed when I have a memory of this image, and it's always kind of stuck in my head. This is my nephew Dougal visiting the animation, and something that I think has always been a sort of response to Katy's work, especially for children, is to kind of interact and to put themselves into the frame as well. And perhaps as adults, we're a little more kind of reserved in terms of that type of interaction. But I've always really enjoyed seeing the way that especially children kind of just participate and really kind of soak up the sensory experience of the animation. It's a very kind of joyful process. And this is something that has come out of more um, more recent research within the archive, and has actually come to be represented in the current exhibition that we have at Glasgow International. So I'll come back to that a little later and share one of the pieces of work that we've kind of pulled out from the archive that really kind of represents this as well. So after the DCA exhibition, um, we, as Sorcha said, we applied to be part of the Art 360 Scotland sort of cohort of archives. So this was really significant support, really pitched towards supporting artists and artist estates, specifically with archiving processes. And so, in order to, the work had really been kind of predominantly in storage at this point, um, and so this was a moment where all of the work kind of found a home in its current studio, which is part of an artist studio space at the Crichton campus in Dumfries. So this is actually my niece Abby doing some redecorating work in the studio prior to us uh, transporting all of the work and just being able to have everything in one place and for it to be accessible and for it to be unpacked from lots of cardboard boxes and sitting on shelves and be kind of browsable um, was was a really kind of um, important step at that point. And as I said, Art 360 came on board to support a process that was a discussion that took place over time. So initially, they were really kind of working with us to understand where we were at with Katy's archive, the type of support that we were looking for. Obviously, different people who were part of that program. Some of them were working artists, kind of in the midst of their career, and some of them were artists estate like us, who were kind of working with artist legacy. And so I think they really brought um, expertise around connecting us with um, people who could advise on things that we really were unsure about, including kind of, I guess we'd built up a bit of a DIY archiving process at that point, and it was all still kind of spreadsheet based. Um, and also connecting me with different kind of professionals who could offer their advice or support. And so this was at the point that I started working with Laura Plant, whose curation name is Chorus. Laura's an independent curator based in Glasgow, who has also worked on various different kind of artist archival projects. And so it was really helpful to have someone kind of come into the archive and be able to um, reflect back at me where I was at in terms of my relationship with the archive and my knowledge of it, and ask questions and just be really curious about the work that was there, and to really think about that with like a curatorial and kind of wider contemporary art practice kind of lens. And this at this point, we worked to transfer our kind of hard drive based, spreadsheet based version of the catalogue of Katy's work into an online archiving space. So we've created this digital space through Artwork Archive. There's quite a lot of different kind of sort of archiving online-based softwares that we looked at. A lot of them are kind of designed for museums and galleries and institutions. And we went with our Artwork Archive because it's more designed to be kind of artist-led and to be a tool for artists to um, manage their own archives. And so something that this really kind of has helped with is to make the archive a lot more accessible for people who might be inquiring about work, who might want to see a preview of an animation or um, might have an inquiry about a specific piece of work or kind of area of Katie's practice. And so Artwork Archive allows me to kind of be managing the artwork continuously in the background, but also kind of create these spaces where we can share sections of the full archive in a more public context or through kind of one-to-one inquiries as well. And so um, this is still like a, there's a lot to flesh out. And something that I was saying to Sorsha just before we started was like I am still discovering a lot within the archive. Even though Katy was, she was kind of in the midst of her career, maybe hadn't accumulated as much work as you might, kind of um, further down the line. But there's still a huge amount there, and it's like sort of 17 years worth of her creative practice. And because there was no kind of archiving initially done by Katy herself, it's interesting. It's almost sometimes a bit like puzzle pieces coming together. So, for example, I'll often find sketches or drawings within the archive that I realize are part of an animation or I recognize as an element of an animation. And what this kind of digital space has allowed me to do is kind of make those connections. And so it's a good way of gradually over time kind of accumulating all of the not all of the knowledge, but a lot of those connections that would exist in the artist's own head because they've produced the work, but might not necessarily be apparent to someone coming in and just taking each kind of example of work um, in turn, because there's a lot of, that's overlapping in terms of elements of the work. And so I worked with Laura and with Art 360 towards an open studio where we invited people over a weekend to come into the archive, come in and browse the collection and be able to browse the new digital archive and have conversations, look at work together. And through the development of um, planning for that event, I think I realized I wasn't really sure what to pick out myself in kind of in a sort of curatorial sense, what work to exhibit within the open studio context. And something that I touched on at the start that has always been really significant in our approach to managing and caring for Katy's archive has been like the peer support network that surrounds Katy's work. She was a very collaborative artist, and she was, as I said, very kind of generous in terms of sharing her um, sharing her process and kind of inviting others in. And so, um, in order to think or to draw out some of those connections that exist within the archive, but that are perhaps more invisible, um, we contacted various people, friends, curators, who Katy had worked with on different projects throughout her career, and asked them to what was a significant work that was in the archive for them or a significant memory of a piece for them. And that was our kind of approach to picking out pieces from the archive, which that was the initial idea, was to help me kind of just choose from this kind of vast archive what to show. But actually, what I realized that it did was um, bring to life a lot of the stories that exist within an archive, that are there, kind of underlying all of those pieces, but that no one person um, can grasp. And each person coming into um, the archive who has a memory of Katy or working with Katy or having exhibited Katy's work before will have their own stories and memories. And it was a really like beautiful process actually, just to hear, to invite that, and then and also share the digital archive with those people for them to kind of browse and see what jumped out at them. And some people had immediately knew what they wanted to share, and other people kind of spent time browsing and thinking about it. Um, but yeah, it made me realize that that's actually a process that I would like to continue, is inviting these kind of um, types of engagement with pieces of work in the archive. And so these are just some photos from the day of people coming and having a look at works within the archival boxes, kind of chatting about some of these kind of elements that exist within um, the archive, things that maybe are sketches that then were developed into um, a final painting, or were kind of worked in different ways across different kind of pieces of work. And this sketch I really love, the one that I'm holding, which is like an element from an animation called You, which is actually in the National Galleries collection and was shown at National Galleries in 2024. Um, and in a kind of big space and projected really huge. And so this shape within the animation is like, it's like an enormous kind of presence that kind of fills the whole room and fills the whole space. And I was really surprised when I found the actual original sketch that it's just like a tiny little postcard size sketch. So it's always nice kind of finding these layers and seeing the origins of things. We also had some interactive kind of workshops based on workshops that we had kind of documentation of that Katy had run with kind of school groups and participants through previous projects and through artist residencies. So this was a kind of slide making workshop where we had different kind of um, materials, natural materials, feathers, leaves, as well as kind of paints and pigments that people could create their own little kind of slide from and then project it through the slide projector. And we had animations as well playing in the sort of space upstairs from the studio. And as part of the kind of launch of the online archive and to celebrate the Open Studio event, Laura and I created a archival print, um, which we spent some time thinking about and sort of taking some advice around because it's always been, um, I guess, an area that I have felt that I need to be careful with in terms of sharing um, material, unfinished work, or perhaps research material, or kind of, yeah, elements within the archive that were not kind of definitively like a finished piece of work. Um, but it's also like a really interesting way to invite participation and interaction and to kind of share new material. And so we chose this image because it was a still that Katy herself had pulled from um, one of her animations called Amanda. We thought it would work really beautifully as a printed image. And we named it Hazel because um, the animation title had, through kind of looking through the digital archive, we realized the original title of the animation had been Hazel and then had been renamed Amanda at a later date. And so it's nice to kind of draw these strands out that already exist within the archive and find kind of new ways of sharing those. And I think also through the process of developing and hosting the Open Studio, it allowed me to go through a bit of a perspective and relationship shift with my own relationship with the archive. I realized that initially, when I was caring for Katy's work, I would always kind of be trying to ask myself what Katy's decision would be around something, or what she would have thought about something or said about something. But actually, I mean, Katy was someone who was really difficult to second guess. And so that's almost an impossible task in itself. But I think I've realized over time that also a relationship with kind of caring for an archive becomes over time. Um, it's obviously still very important to think about the artist's intentions and to maintain, their ethos within that legacy. But also, like Katy's archive and any artist archive, um, it can become, a kind of static repository if it's not kind of kept in dialogue with the, contemporary art world and kind of activated through new ways of engaging with it or through inviting new collaboration um, or kind of working on new projects. And so that's been something that I've kind of come, it's taken me time to feel confident with my relationship with the archive in that kind of in that kind of custodianship, I suppose, and in that kind of more active way. So a lovely example of this kind of continuation is, and also just something that I've come to realize is important not to um, uh, important to kind of take take small moments or small, kind of maybe conversations or small connections that come up and find ways of taking those forward. And Sheila McDougall, who you see pictured here with me in the Open Studio event, is a dancer and uh, a collaborator, previous collaborator of Katie's, who worked with her on a couple of different projects, who visited the Open Studio event and looked at one of the pieces of work on the wall and said, "That looks like a dance to me." And that kind of sowed a seed between Sheila and I of thinking about how we could work with that in future. And it's taken time to kind of come to fruition, but through the current exhibition at Glasgow International, we are working with the GI Gatherings programme to invite Sheila and other members of a dance collective that she is part of called In the Making to come and actually spend a day kind of workshopping their movement practice around in response to the exhibition at Kenning Park Complex. And then they will share a kind of loose performance or a response, movement response based on their time and their engagement with the work there. So yeah, it's nice when these kind of little threads or little conversations lead to something further down the line. And just good to kind of like seize those. Um, and yeah, just a couple of other things. So things have started to come into the archive now, and I think that's partly because there's more visibility through events, through social media, through having a web presence. Um, and yeah, just through kind of people engaging with the archive, materials have begun to kind of return to the archive or be donated to the archive. So one of those was one of Katie's paint palettes that Katie's partner Tom had kind of in his own private collection and wanted to kind of donate that. This was a surprise. These were some um, just what I thought were empty frames within Katie's kind of one of Katie's boxes. And I was going to use one of the frames. And um, when I took the back off it and turned it around, I found this drawing kind of hidden in the back of the frame. And this is actually the title. Again, a very tiny drawing that became part of the animation U and is something that kind of appears very big within the frame. So it's lovely when these kind of um, ephemera and materials kind of come into the archive as well. So just looking to kind of slightly more recent times, Lux, Artist Moving Image, have taken on the representation of Katie's moving image works, which is another kind of significant step in terms of being a national body who can represent and distribute Katie's animation works and like them being a kind of core hub for a lot of artists moving image work. Just again, kind of adds Katie's work adds a lot more visibility and makes that a lot more of an accessible kind of place in order to license her moving image work or to preview it as well. And as I mentioned previously, in 2024, I think 23 to 24 national galleries showed the animation U, which is in their collection as part of an exhibition of works within the collection. And yeah, it was really special to have that kind of available for a duration of time. And I know a lot of people really enjoyed kind of meeting Katie's work within that context as well. And this was another event that came out of the Open Studio, which was a Katy Dove kind of afternoon in Edinburgh Printmakers, where we showed, we had archive materials available to look at. We had a screening room with a few animations playing, and also animation-based workshop for people to get involved with some of those processes. And that just brings me up to our current exhibition, The Subtle Body, which is now open at Kenning Park Complex in Glasgow and is part of the GI Open programme. And this has been developed again with Laura Plant with Chorus. And this again came out of like a seed that was sown quite early on, which was noticing a publication of the Brazilian artist Legia Clark within Katy's own archive, and thinking about the connection between the two artists' work. And Laura and I developed a conversation around the idea of two artists' archives being kind of in conversation with one another as part of an exhibition. And I think, yeah, I didn't know a great deal about Lydia Clark's work prior to this exhibition, but there's a lot of overlaps there, although they were working in very different contexts, in terms of like a shared interest in perception, in sensory experience, in terms of the body's relation to artwork, and a sense of creating conditions for experiences, so kind of meaning emerging through experience with artwork, a kind of relational interaction with artwork, as opposed to kind of prescribing meanings or narratives. And both artists having a shared interest in collective experiences and encounters. And so it's been a really interesting process to kind of explore this connection, and bring these two artists' works into this kind of dialogue with one another. So these are just some images of the exhibition space at Kinning Park Complex, where we've brought together materials from Katy's archive, with photographic print material from the Lydia Clark Association, Cultural Association. Um, and I just wanted to share a small video, just coming to the end of the presentation, but a video that is playing within this exhibition, which really kind of comes back to that the connections that I mentioned earlier, one of them being the interactivity of Katy's work, and sort of um, people kind of putting themselves into the frame. And this was very much an intentional process through a workshop that Katy ran with the dancer Sheila McDougall, and documentation of that, of the outcome of that, which is a video with primary school pupils at Wellhouse Primary, um, who are dancing in response to one of Katy's projected animations, um, as a sort of outcome to time spent with Sheila and Katy in a workshop capacity. So it's about 45 seconds snippet of the video that I will play you. I really love that video, and it was such a joy to kind of discover it within Katie's digital archive. And actually, quite late in the process, Laura and I had initially thought that the work was silent, and then discovered that it did have a soundtrack that was kind of in a separate folder. And so it was nice to kind of bring those back together again and be able to share them through this exhibition. Um, there's other archival materials, some kind of work in process materials, including field recordings, and soundtrack material, that Katy had been in the process of developing for a new work in progress, and animations also playing as part of the current exhibition. So please do come and visit, and yeah, and come and say hi if you do make it along. We're open Wednesdays to Sundays, 11 till 6, and also by appointment if you'd like to come in on Mondays or Tuesdays or out with those times. Um, and yeah, I kind of intended to finish by just chatting about some of the sort of current reality and challenges around kind of funding, legacy, storage, valuations. But maybe it's a nice time to just kind of open up into questions, and some of those things might kind of come out as part of the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. That's such a comprehensive kind of overview, your journey through it. I also love how you're talking about the ways in which the process of archiving has obviously informed the open studio, the pop-up exhibitions, obviously the current show, the subtle body. So the way that these have activities have also influenced your direction to being really responsive to it. I think we could do a whole other session, right, on challenges, funding, and other things. But I'm hoping people will either come off silent and ask a question or put it in the chat. I'm happy to pose it to Emma. Maybe I could kick it off and ask you a little bit about maybe if there's one aspect. I mean, everyone caring for Artist Archives, it's a deep connection and care that we're doing for the material stuff, but also the people that the stuff's connected to that we care about, and none so more so in your case and with your sister, Katy. But what are some of the things that you think are a little bit underestimated in terms of like time, resourcing, or expertise within all of this?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think for me, speaking personally, um, I did find it a real challenge initially just to get kind of general guidance around artist archive and artist legacy. And I did find a couple of books that were really useful, and I'm happy to kind of share details of those. Um, I think that the Art 360 program was also really significant. They were kind of filling a bit of a gap there within the kind of um, art world framework, in terms of that support. And it's a shame that they um, no longer exist, sadly. Although they have, kind of legacy resources that you can tap into. But and I know you had a whole session with Ellie Porter as well. So like also go and listen to Ellie's presentation because she's an absolute font of knowledge around that. Um, yeah, I mean funding is always a challenge,
Mm.
and
That was actually a little bit in, we got a question in the chat actually about funding. I'm with someone, Rachel, who, if I can maybe just summarise it, because there's a few questions within it, but she was just wanting to ask you a wee bit about that. If you get funding from Creative Scotland or from other sources like loaning, selling the work, and how do you juggle that resourcing around trying to deliver? Obviously, you got a bit of support from GI for the Subtle Body show, but all the other stuff that you've spoken about or want to do, I can imagine now from also building from the current exhibition as well.
yeah, it's a really important question. So in terms of the funding for the archive, there have been some funds that have come in through sale of work. And Katy did edition her animations. So occasionally there may be sales of an animation that might go into a collection, or Katie's print work. We have editions of print work that occasionally have also brought in a bit of kind of revenue to the archive. So those are like the archive's own funds. Um, I have also recently applied to Creative Scotland funding through the Open programme and was not successful, but have had some useful, comprehensive feedback and planning to kind of build on um, the outcomes and kind of conversations that are coming up through the Glasgow International Exhibition to kind of resubmit that application. Um, but there's also, I know, sort of that you ran a session with National Archives around some of their funding streams, um, and you can listen back to that session. Um, and I'm looking at applying to them. Um, and a little bit of money also comes in from Lux through licensing Katie's animations to for screenings and things like that. Um, so there's little bits. Currently, some of the just kind of core costs, such as insurance and studio hire, are covered privately through my mum, who's the executor of the estate. Um, so it's a sort of hodgepodge. And sometimes, yes, as you said, Saoirse, there's been funding through the GI Open programme, which I think was about 5K in total, specifically to support that animation, that exhibition. Um, but it's yeah, it's an ongoing process.
Yeah, I mean, good to hear that you've had positive conversations with Creative Scotland. I mean, that's been something I guess that this network's been about, trying to make the case for Artists Archive being an area of growing concern that Creative Scotland hopefully will acknowledge, I guess, as an art form or a place that needs supported. They invest so much into creative practice and artistic practice that this is obviously the next step to build on that. I wanted to ask you too, if that's all right, Emma, a little bit about like maybe what advice you might give to other artists, because I'm sure there's some on the webinar today about documenting and organising their work to support maybe the future life beyond their active careers, or any kind of insights that you could offer future artists considering maybe something like this. You've obviously spoke quite eloquently about the multidisciplinary approach of Katie's work, but also some of the elements and some of the ephemera and some of the different materials she was using that you're also trying to map within the archive as well.
Yeah, I just realized maybe I should stop sharing my screen. I think for me, it has been really significant to work with someone else in the process of um, working with Katie's archive and also working around kind of the archiving process itself. And so, I mean, initially, as I said, that was very much a kind of peer support network. And I think, yeah, if we're talking about an artist thinking about their own legacy and kind of um, developing their own archive, it's perhaps quite a daunting task. And having other people that can kind of reflect back at you, like what's there and what's significant as well, is really helpful. And so, although Katy wasn't able to be part of that process, I think for me, being able to work with people like Laura and for her to um, and other people who have engaged with the archive actually, just to kind of invite those other perspectives, um, and just have someone to help it feel a bit, to help break that down and for it to feel like a less of an overwhelming task um and like also like working with as I mentioned when we transferred our kind of DIY catalog across to like using a software that's designed for that process. Like that really helped as well, just to kind of think about um, the organization of it and made me realize that that's something that is active. It's something that you're feeding into over time and that you can continue to feed into. Um, so, it's not something that you have to do. It's not something that can be done all at once, really. And that is something that can continue, beyond your lifetime if it's something that you've kind of established,
Yeah.
then yeah.
It'd be great to ask you a wee bit more about that. So I think a lot of people get overwhelmed, don't they, a little bit about thinking about archiving and where to start. But a basic Excel listing with fields and catalogues that make sense to you in terms of year group, material type, any notes or information that you can start to map into that. But obviously you then took that and created using, was it the
Artwork
um,
archive.
artwork archives? So you decided to use that one to be able to, has that allowed you to share all the different multidisciplinary strands of Katie's artwork within that listing, or is it a bit more bound by material type in terms of completed
Mm.
artwork, that kind of thing?
Um, it's primarily designed for like physical works, but you can like kind of connect the dots between multiple kind of listings within it. And I still do, I'm looking on the table beside me because I have like a hard drive that is the Katy Dove archive hard drive, which has multiple backups, um, which I still do go into like a lot, which is the kind of di all the digital ephemera, I suppose. Um, but actually, just something that's maybe useful to note in a practical sense was that the artwork archive transfer was not a like individual one at a time process. So although there was a bit of reworking of the spreadsheet version, we were able to kind of, as long as things were in roughly the right kind of categories, then we were able to kind of upload that as a like a bulk upload. So it was about like images of work having the same kind of archive code as was in the spreadsheet, and then it connects all that information within the software. So that was really like made it less daunting, not thinking that we had to just do each individual listing one at a time, but that it could be kind of imported from our current archiving process into theirs.
That's great. That's when those systems work effectively, right?
Yeah.
There's a question in the chat about what was your perception of archives and archivists and what they do before you took on this project. Can you even remember?
That's a great question. I wonder if I'd really given it much thought. I think maybe only through, I suppose initially when I took on the custodianship of Katie's work, it took me a while for like to think of it as an archive. Initially, I was just thinking, well, I just need to kind of manage, inquiries that come in for like showing work or showing an animation, and like I can do that because I know how to do it. Um, I suppose the closest that I might have had to those conversations beforehand would be just speaking to other like peers, like who are artists who maybe were talking about their own legacy and what they want, to exist, in future, or what they don't want to exist also. Like, some people feel quite strongly about like getting rid of stuff that they don't want to kind of be part of their legacy. So I guess I had those conversations with artists, but yeah, not really a sense of I would have thought of archives and archivists as being predominantly in kind of institutional contexts and not necessarily in kind of these more private, personal, um, like individual type relationships.
Yeah, and maybe there's something to be said about, as a result of that, some of the ways in which I think when you're starting to go on the kind of daunting journey of managing an archive, you think it has to follow a certain way of cataloguing and organising that information, but actually the most successful way is, as you've kind of evolved it yourself, is making sense of the material and organising it in a way that makes sense to you and also to the practitioner as well. So I think it's, starting somewhere small and growing it and adapting it and being responsive, right,
Mm.
as you go to.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I just wonder if anyone's got any other questions that they'd like to come off mute and ask. We've got a few minutes left before we need to wind the webinar up. No one? Well, I mean, we're getting lots of messages in the chat just saying, thank you, Emma, for a really incredible presentation. A lovely one from Alice saying she's no doubt, Katy, we've been really delighted at everything you're doing. And I hopefully there'll be more people coming along and inspired to visit the Subtle Body after hearing from you too. Do you want to share a little bit more? I know you did earlier about the dates and also the upcoming performance this weekend.
Yeah, so the exhibition is running Wednesday to Sunday, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. Until the 21st. So the 21st is the final day, 21st of June. The performance is happening this Saturday, 13th of June at 12:30 p.m. On the fourth floor of Kinning Park Complex, which has step-free access. There's a lift access to the top floor, and it's free to attend, but it is ticketed, so you can find tickets through Glasgow International's Gatherings programme.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so please come along. It'd be lovely to see you.
Great. And of course, you can explore a little bit more about what Katy Dove Archive, through what Emma's been discussing through your website as well, right? And also have a
Yeah,
good look through the catalogue and see how that's kind of interfaced with the website as well. What an informative session, Emma. Thank you so much. I know you're just through a few weeks of very busy working with GI and installation, so we hugely appreciate you sharing your really valuable insights with us and the wider network. We have recorded the session today. We'll be putting that on the YouTube channel soon and sharing it more widely. But thank you so much again to all of you for coming along. But a final thank you to Emma for her wonderful presentation. Thank you everyone for joining us. Bye.
thank you. Thanks.